Thank my lucky stars to be living here today. 'Cause the flag still stands for freedom, and they can't take that away.
You're listening to Wild About Liberty on KXEX 1550, where we discuss the importance of our liberty and how to preserve it. Now, here's your host, Terry Wild.
Well, I'm glad you tuned in today. This is Friday. It's our second week of being with Wild About Liberty radio program and TV podcast. And so what we're doing today is we're going to use Friday as our week in review, talk about some of the things that we've covered over the past week. And we have some really outstanding guests today. Let me introduce you to Fred Vanderhoff. Fred, you have been the chairman of the Republican Party in Fresno County until recently when you stepped down. How long were you the chairman?
8 years.
8 years. And so I know I've known you for 4 years and appreciate your leadership and the heart that you have for getting the state where we want it to be. And we have Richard Bailey, an attorney and someone that has a lot of keen insight. Richard?
Yeah, mostly deep insights. But it's really a privilege to be here with Neil and Lawrence and Terry and Fred. So we hope we can offer you some interesting tidbits and give you a fun hour. And we're talking about what's happening in the world today, and just hope we can be useful.
Well, you know, Neil, we've known each other for a number of years, and I've come to really appreciate and respect you. Give us a little of your background. Let people know who you are and what you've been doing.
How long of a background do you want there, Terry?
Well, you know, I remember when Values Advocacy Group started. I was at one of the first meetings, and you and David and how that developed. It really became a meaningful influence in Santa Clara County, and you've done a lot of good work. And so that's kind of still going on, but you're not living in Silicon Valley anymore, are you?
Yeah. So actually, the VAC was founded in 2005 with Dave Sawkins and Larry Pegram, and I think you and I were at the first meeting. At that time, I wasn't involved in it either. I was just at that meeting. And then later on, they brought me in as a board member, and then when Larry Pegram retired in 2016, I think it was, they fooled me into becoming the president. Only supposed to be interim, but here we are. What's it, 7 years later or 8? Yeah, 7 years later, and I'm still the president. So basically, we kind of were a small group until COVID. It was originally started to get pastors involved with politics and to take the moral authority that they have, but they weren't doing it. So the group sort of, and I say this, it devolved into just a group that involved ordinary Christians and citizens, when it really should have been engaging the pastors, but the pastors just wouldn't play. So we, during COVID, it blew up, the group blew up, we had a lot of influence, we were bringing a lot of people into the fold, educating people, we had a lot of great speakers, and then somewhere around that time, I realized that I'd been blacklisted. I couldn't get a job anywhere, even though I'd started 4 companies, raised over $88 million in venture funds. I'm a hardware engineer. Had just excellent reputation in the Valley, and suddenly found out that I couldn't be hired, and worse, I couldn't raise any funds to start my own company. So at that point, we decided that it didn't make sense to live in the expensive Silicon Valley. So we moved to Idaho last year, but we still fly back to the VAC meetings every month. The VAC has, since COVID is gone, it looks like people have a very short attention span. They don't understand the dangers lurking. So the VAC has kind of shrunk back down there's nothing like a good emergency, a good crisis to bring people out. But when the crisis is past, they have very short memories. So the VAC is actually in San Jose. We're trying to retool and reboot, and maybe one of the future shows I can tell you what we're planning on doing here.
Yeah, I'd love to know.
See if we will continue in the Silicon Valley. And let me tell you, meanwhile, what's happening, and I can tell you this later. That's my brief summary. We can talk about what we're doing in Idaho and the huge footprint we've had there in a year.
Yeah, we want to hear about that. And Lawrence Hebron, I've come to know you as someone that is like Richard Bailey to my right here, a deep thinker. You really get down into the nitty gritty of things. You've written a couple books. Tell us about that, the books that you've written, and what you're doing now in your life.
Okay, certainly. Hi, Terry, and congratulations on the radio program here. Looks like you're getting off to a great start. I'm honored to be a part of it. I also want to say, before I get into that, this is November the 10th, day before Veterans Day. I want to acknowledge all of our veterans and all that they have done for so long to give us this wonderful country. And also, as a little personal item, November 10th is also the birthday of the United States Marine Corps. And having served in that Corps, that's right, hoorah, Semper Fi to all my Marine buddies, leathernecks out there. So I want to acknowledge that it's 248th birthday of the United States Marine Corps. The Marine Corps is actually older than the United States. So, I think we're holding up pretty well. Regarding the books, kind of in chronological order, I started off with one about 12, 13 years ago called Solutions, Guidebook for Rebuilding America the Great. Followed up with another one kind of became topical, and it certainly is today. It's called Islam Exposed, What You Need to Know About the World's Most Dangerous Religion. This one, I wasn't intending to write. I've studied history for over half a century, and you can't do that without bumping into Islam, because it's been a huge force in history for about 14 centuries. But it had been set back on its heels about a century ago, but it was making a comeback, and a lot of that comeback manifested in acts of terror. So we started hearing, 15, 20 years ago, more and more interviews about Islam. What is it? Things like Hamas, Hezbollah, and Al-Qaeda, etc. Are these examples of Islam extremists, or is this Islam? And I thought I knew the answer, but I wasn't too sure. I wasn't too confident in my answer, so I decided I'd read the Quran. And that raised more questions than it answered. So it kind of drew me in, though. And I went on to some other works, including two of the main sources that Muslims themselves use to decide everything from theology, national policy, foreign policy, right down to personal behavior, including which direction do you spit if you have to spit during your daily prayers. I mean, it gets that detailed. And as I read through this, I just thought, goodness, this is monstrous. I mean, people have no idea how serious and dangerous this is. So I thought, well, I started collecting a lot of quotes. I think in this book, there's over 300 quotes. Over 97% of them are from either the Quran, one of the Hadith, which are the eye and ear witness narratives of what Muhammad said and did, and also the Sirat Rasul Allah, which is the life of Allah's messenger. It's basically the authorized biography of Muhammad. So I invite people to read for themselves, but I culled from that a lot of information and put it out there. Then I wrote a couple having to do with AR2, which refers to the Second American Revolution. So the first one was nonfiction, AR2, Handbook for the Second American Revolution. And then a couple of years after that, during 2020, with all the election and the pandemic and everything going on, I got the notion to write a novel. And in modern day America, what is going on right now, very topical, but insert a hero who would then do the things that I recommended in the AR2 handbook.
Now, did you name him Donald Trump by any chance?
No, I didn't. He was Patrick Harder. Although most of there is a Donald Trump character in there, most of the characters have names that sort of give you a clue about who they are or what they're all about. So the main character is Patrick Harder. Patrick is as close as I could come to patriot in a name. And Harder, kind of using my background, he was a Marine veteran, Marine war hero. He's a tough guy, but he's got a heart of gold. But there is a Trump character in there. And he's the sitting president at the time, and his name is Cornet. Well, a cornet is a short trumpet. So you get the trump in there. Then we have the character who was running against him was a doddering old man who had been a lot of things, but had not done much. And his name was not Joseph, but Jason Fantoche. Now, Fantoche is the French word for puppet. And I think it summarizes exactly what his role was. So anyway, we had that. And then let's see, there was another one I wrote, a kind of a nonfiction one called In the Beginning. And this is in the category of the Conversation with God books out there, although this conversation is between God and the baby in the womb. So God basically introduces himself almost immediately after conception. They have a 9-month conversation where God tries to give him a divine, benign heads up for the life that he's going to live. You know, what would God talk about? And then that's in the first section. And then there's one more chapter after that. The first part ends just a couple of hours after the birth of this child. And then the second section, we jump ahead about 82 years, and the same person is now on the way back to the hospital to die. And after he dies, well, guess who shows up again? There's going to be a conversation. And this guy, he's had a tough life. He's basically pretty bitter, disgruntled, disappointed. And when God shows up after his passing, he realizes now this presence in the darkness, as he did the first time when he was in the womb. And he says, "Oh, it's you. Well, I guess you're pretty disappointed in me."
Mm-hmm.
And God replies, "No, but I know you're pretty disappointed in me. We need to talk."
Well, that sounds like an interesting read. Richard, I think he's got you beat. You've written 2 books, right?
I've got 0 published. I've got one coming out in January, and then the second one would be probably in August of next year. So, and at this point, we got to move on to other subject because this is.
Well, you know what we're doing today. This is our weekend review. We're just going to go down a bunch of topics and things that have been happening throughout the week and how it affects us. You know, Fresno County is making, the people here are making a real serious effort to turn things around in our county at a local level. Of course, we're involved with the state and national things that are going on, but we just need and want people to get the information so they can make the right decisions. And Fred, what's your week been like? How's it been with the Republican Party and things that are going on with you?
Well, I think one of the keys for the Republican Party is to organize and to get as many groups. There's many groups that are out there that are conservative groups. We need to work together, and there's some good news on that front. We're starting to work together more and more every day. So we need to do that. In the news, though, we had a tough week with elections, and Ohio. Ohio had a vote, and that was shocking. That was I forgot what the number one issue number one in Ohio is to constitutional right. They passed abortion, that people in Ohio have a constitutional right to abortion until birth, and that's almost as bad as Virginia. Virginia, a couple of years ago, tried to pass something so that babies that were born could actually be killed. So this is similar, not quite as bad, but it's a shock because Ohio's a pretty conservative state, a red state. So I think with abortion, that's an issue that we've been playing defense too much. 15 weeks, 12 weeks, heartbeat, trying to figure out when it should stop. We need to play offense. We need to show people how radical the left is on this issue because of those just 2 I just mentioned.
Exactly. Well, Richard, do you think we're going to be able to win on that issue with abortion?
Yes. I think the thing is, you have to look at what people are talking about. We had the train wreck in Virginia and Ohio, and the question is, what are people saying about it? And so what I do every day is go through news articles and then do a daily update. And the idea is to look at long-term trends and the realignment, which is way in our favor. And there's a bunch of issues where the Democrats are peeling off parts of their base. So when it comes to abortion, it's pretty much all they got left. And the only way it works is for them to scare the bejeebers out of regular folks. And that's what happened in Ohio, to the certain extent in Virginia. So what Cal Thomas wrote in Town Hall, which is a really great website, is a critique of Ohio, Virginia, and abortion. And his argument was that pro-lifers have to go out on the offensive. In other words, we basically just set ourselves up. We've got a few people taking extreme views. It's just like Fred said, and then we're not giving the counter argument. And one of the things he said, for instance, was just 1% of women obtain an abortion because they became pregnant through rape, and less than 0.05% due to incest. So the point is, we're not making those arguments. So the Republican Party is sort of referred to as the dumb party, and that's the reason. I mean, we sit there and we're not quick on our effective messaging. We need to basically, if Ohio wants to pass a law on abortion, the Supreme Court said that's their right. But when it comes to this particular issue, it's just one of many issues. We've got a ton of issues where the trend is in our direction. So I think it's a great time to be alive, and the fact that we tend to focus on our losses is unfortunate, but we can do better. And I think what Fred is doing here in Fresno County is wonderful, and he created one of the greatest programs for internships and outreach that I've ever seen.
He did.
Absolutely. So at this point, I think you just have to let the peace of God rule your thinking when it comes to politics, and not discourage yourself by focusing only on the bad stuff.
That's right. We're going to have losses in the short run. That's just the way history's been. But in the long run, God wins.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
we're on the right side. So we just got to keep fighting.
Well, Neil, you distinguish yourself in a lot of ways, but one of the ways is you're a Christian apologist. And so this issue and what's going on with the area of abortion, how do you advise, just from a political point of view, what's your advice for us to deal with that issue and still win?
Well, I mean, if you look at the youngsters, if you look at anybody below the age of 13, they're all pro-life. They have to be trained. I mean, I've taught hundreds of youth, junior high youth, and I've never found a pro-choice junior high youth. So they're born pro-life. Kids younger than that are obviously pro-life. What happens is they get brainwashed in the schools, they get brainwashed in the colleges, they get brainwashed by the media. And so really the responsibility of making sure our kids end up pro-life is really on the parents. And folks, this is not a hard argument. I mean, most of the time, if you show a mutilated baby corpse from an abortion, people are going to revolt again. I mean, their whole insides to revolt against that. The problem is that we're too wimpy to show those pictures. We're too wimpy to go out there. And yet, if you look at the history of the civil rights movement, the whole movement started because the African American mother was not afraid to show the picture of her, the body of her son that had been lynched by KKK members.
Emmett Till.
Emmett Till, and that gave Rosa Parks the incentive to not move from the back of the bus, and her actions gave a young preacher named Martin Luther King the incentive to take action. And so these things grow. We need to be very active on that. That's just one of the things. The second thing is you got to teach these kids. I know very few churches that are teaching their kids about abortion. We are at the VAC. We will be teaching it. In fact, that's one of the topics we'll be covering in the new VAC. But here's the deal. The reality is that this is all our fault. We don't even need to be battling this if enough of us went out and started voting. You mentioned that in your show yesterday. Something like 2/3 of Christians are not even voting. There's about 91 million Christians in America today. 2/3 of them are not voting, and the ones that are voting aren't always voting for the right things. So this is something that really lays at the feet of the pastors, which comes right back to what the VAC was founded for. The pastors need to take responsibility.
But you were also involved. You and Kevin McCary formed an organization that, womb to the tomb, called Every Black Life Matters. Tell us just a little bit about that organization.
Yeah, so back into 2020, when BLM was tearing down the streets and destroying black and brown businesses, not many very white businesses, FIFA, my wife turned to me and said, there needs to be a Christian, godly alternative to BLM. And so I called up Kevin McGarry and I said, hey, because he's the president of the Frederick Douglass Foundation. I said, hey, Kevin, go back, talk to the Frederick Douglass Foundation people, and you should start an alternative. Well, we got a message back from Frederick Douglass saying, hey, guys, we're too busy bringing out the vote for Trump, which they did. I think they increased it from 15% to 18% in the black community.
They did an awesome job.
Yeah, and they're working on that again. But they said, we're too busy. You and Neil need to go start this organization. So Kevin said, hey, we're doing it. And I said, Kevin, I'm not black. He goes, no, but you are African American. And he is correct. I was born in Ghana and grew up in Sudan. So he said, you're more African than I am, because I spent my entire childhood in Africa. And so we started Every Black Life Matters. And one of our principles is, real justice from womb to the tomb. And that means that we think that the genocide of African American, if you think about it, if you look at the numbers, and this, as I said, it's a very easy argument. There are 44 million African Americans today. There would be 64 million. 20 million of them have been killed in the womb. So that's a black genocide of 50% of the existing population. I don't know how you can go to anybody and say this is not a racist. This is called systemic racism any way you look at it. And most of those funds come from taxpayers. So that's the argument there. And as I said, it's a very compelling argument. If you go to anybody and say, 20 million, 50% of all African Americans have been killed in the womb. What do you think about that? Do you think we should stop it? And of course, the hardcore people are going to say no. And as soon as they say no, you call them a racist. Let's play the same game.
Well, give everyone the web address for Every Black Life Matters. This is one of the reasons I wanted you to come on the show and talk about it. People need to be aware, and that's what our job here at Wild About Liberty is supposed to be all about, giving people useful information and options on how to deal with some of these things. And Every Black Life Matters is a powerful tool to be able to refute. They're trying to characterize everybody as phobes and cruel and all these different titles that they give us.
Right. So so the website is everyblm.com, everyblm.com. And we have our principles. When we started, we were like, well, whatever our principles are. Well, it was easy. We went to BLM's principles and did the opposite of every one of them. And it turns out the opposite of every one of them is because they say Black Lives Matter because of systemic racism. Well, we went through every one of their principles, and every one of the principles that they are for is exactly why African-American plight exists. For instance, they're against the nuclear family. And we can tell you that the number one cause of Black plight, for the unemployment, for the violence, for the excess sexuality amongst young women, for the gang members, is fatherlessness. And yet they're against the nuclear family. They're for everything under the world, LGBTQ plus and everything else. And that's precisely why the Black family is suffering. And so it was real easy that way. But if you go down our principles, you'll see all of those things are we're against abortion, obviously. We're against, we want for educational reform because the inner city schools, I mean, here's a quick statistic and I'll stop there, is in the 1930s, at the height of the Jim Crow laws, the Black literacy rate was 70%, 70%. Today, it is 17%.
Wow.
17.7. So you tell me if racism was the cause of Black literacy, or was it government involvement? The real reason that Blacks are where they are is because the government has helped them. You know, as John Reagan said, the most dangerous words in the English language are, "I am from the government and here to help you."
Well, you know, Lawrence, I've talked to you about a number of issues, and you have really keen insight on so many of them. Well, how do you look at what Neil is saying with the Black community, and what are your thoughts?
Well, I think he's exactly right. If you look at the history of this for going over a couple of centuries now, what you find is that in the middle part of the 20th century, the Black population was really starting to make some nice progress. And then the Democrats and the liberals discovered identity politics. And they started playing to all these different groups, trying to cobble together their 51%. And they did it in the typical democratic manner. This is why the founders did not like democracy. If everybody says, oh, preserve our democracy, well, the founders didn't believe in democracy. They called it mobocracy. Because in a democracy, there's no commitment to rights. You know, all you have to do is get 51% to vote to something today, and whatever existed yesterday doesn't apply anymore. So what the Democrats started doing is throwing money at all these different groups and acted like they were their friends. I mean, the same people who were the founders of the KKK and who voted against all of the different amendments that established freedom and ended the slavery and all of this. Now, all of a sudden, they see the Blacks as an opportunity to perpetuate themselves in power, and they just threw money at them and all of these nice sounding programs. And what happened was exactly what Neil was talking about. We created the second slavery. We got these Black families. First of all, we threw the dads out because we created a financial incentive to make more money if the dads weren't there. So we threw the dads out, and Neil's already talked about the huge and horrible impact that has. We broke them down spiritually, whereas the spirituality of the African Americans had been their greatest strength to help them through all the tough times that they went through. Now we're destroying that. We're breaking up the families. We're destroying their education. All of the things that makes you self-sufficient were being attacked by all of these liberal programs, but on the surface, they sounded good. So if you didn't go any deeper than the surface, well, yeah, this guy's going to give me more money. I'll vote for him. Yeah, this guy sounds sympathetic. I'll vote for him, even though it ended up wrecking the Black community. And the statistics just go on and on. Neil talked about the literacy rate. It just goes on and on and on, you know, about the illegitimacy rate and so forth. It's just horrible. It's been devastating. So we need to get back to those core values that made this country great in the first place.
But, you know, Lawrence, the core value, Fred, and the thread that goes through all of this is God, who gave us our inalienable rights and liberties, is either present in what we say and do and our policies, or we're left with the alternative, which is all this stuff that's going on.
Yeah, and you can look at history. I think it's encouraging what's going on right now in, ironically, Yemen and Iran. And those two countries are in the background pushing all this death to Israel and America.
Right.
But the fastest growing church in the world, according to some people, are in both of those countries, Yemen and Iran. So you can see this battle going on. So there's some good things happening, and like I say, we're going to have to ride the waves. But there's some really good things happening historically in this country. We've had major revivals that have preceded political change. First Great Awakening, Whitefield, 1750s or so. Then that led to the founders writing Declaration of Independence, Constitution, Northwest Ordinance. And 50 years later or so, we had the Second Great Awakening. One of the pastors of that said, God will bless or curse a nation according to the role that Christians take in politics. And that Second Great Awakening led to Abraham Lincoln eventually, and it led to the the anti-slavery movement. Mm-hmm. And that I don't think the slaves would have been freed without that Second Great Awakening. And then more recent, we had the Jesus Revolution in early 70s, led to the Reagan Revolution, more majority and that sort of thing. So I think that there is evidence of some not only nationwide but worldwide revivals breaking out in many places. I think that in the future we're gonna see a political change also. Not that that's the main reason for it. I mean,
sure, no, but that's encouraging. You know, Rich, when as you're saying this, Fred, it just took me back to my own situation. In 1969, I became a Christian. But before that time, I lived what would be described as a very ungodly life in all kinds of ways. And I remember my brother, who became a Christian and really influenced me and my whole family. He was telling me all these things about Christianity, and I wanted to know more, but I didn't want to. I wanted to pretend I didn't care. But the thing is, a moment came in my life through a whole bunch of circumstances where I actually saw the light. And I saw this presence of God in a way internally that changed my life. And I became a different person completely. And in my case, it was really dramatic. I gave everything I had away. I went and lived in a Christian commune in the Haight-Ashbury. And that was in 1969 during this whole Jesus movement. But it was a movement. It changed people. It changed me. I want to live to please God. I want rules and laws that reflect God's moral truth and moral reality. And so I was part of that Jesus movement and that change of life that can come to people. And that's what makes our country, you know, that was why people came to America, was to find religious freedom and expression. And they wanted to live out this reality of who God is in how we live our life every day. And so, Richard, that really impacts what's going on today. Is where is God in the equation?
Well, he's there. I mean, you can sit there and leave your mind back in the 1970s, or you can bring yourself up to the 21st century. There's a great book by Vince Ellison called The Iron Triangle, which talks about the mechanisms the Democrats use to keep African Americans under control. Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow, is great because it outs that particular mechanism. And you're seeing African Americans peeling away from the people that have basically been attempting to control them. So it's one of those things where if you want to stick to the 1970s, fine, we're losing. If you want to go to the 21st century, we're winning like crazy. So the same with like in for instance, anti-Semitism is driving Jewish Americans away from the Democrats. In Palestine, in Israel, citizens in Israel like Israel, and they don't like Hamas. So that is a story which is surfacing right now. You're looking at all of these wins, and we tend to ignore them. So I'm just saying, to the extent that this is a show about political trends, I think you're looking at some great wins, and so we can focus on those. I think that's a healthy thing.
And you know, Neil, you focus on those things, and so I'd like tell us a little bit about the atmosphere in Silicon Valley. Do you see a positive direction there?
It's really hard to say. I think the problem with Silicon Valley is most of the Christians have bought the lie that they're a minority and there's nothing they can do. And so I wouldn't say that there are glimmers of hope, but I don't know necessarily if I can predict where it's going to go. It really depends on the Israelites.
How does that work?
I don't mean the Israelis. I mean the Israelites, as in when the Israelites said, "Oh, we are too fearful to enter the land of Canaan," God said, "Okay." And the next battle they lost, and they were trounced completely. Right? When the Israelites said, "God, we will obey you. We will stand for truth. We will stand for what you asked us to," the walls of Jericho fell. Everything. The Midianites were crushed. Whatever. But it really depends on the Israelites. What is their mood? Where are they going to go? God has a plan, but His plan takes into consideration the views and attitudes of His people, and hopefully He will raise judges to lead the people and lead them in the right way. The situation in Idaho is completely different, and I want to give you a few examples to give you hope that maybe that will influence us here in California. And I think Jack Hibbs can probably tell you about a lot more wins in California, like with Chino Hills, the school boards and things like that. They've done a marvelous job there. But let me give you a thing that we've done in Idaho. In Idaho, a lot of people think, Idaho, that's a red state, no problem. But the reality is it's not a red state. It's a rhino state. In Idaho, if you want to run, you have to run as a Republican. So people with no integrity will just put an R by their name and run. So we have a lot of Democrats. In fact, the legislature is full of Democrats who have run as Republicans, the rhinos. So we determined that we need to make some changes. And let me tell you how bad it is. In March of this year, there was a bill that made it out of the House and the Senate that said that children under the age of 18 cannot be sexually castrated or mutilated for transgender surgery. The governor, who's supposed to be a Republican and supposed to be a conservative, was going to veto the bill. Now, why was he going to veto the bill? He was going to veto the bill because two of the largest hospitals in the area, St. Luke's, ironically, and St. Alphonsus, another ironic name, would get $400,000 per child who transitioned to the other gender, $400,000. So if they can get 2,100 children to transition, that's $1 billion in their pocket per year, right? So they were asking him to veto it, and they were pushing on him, and they contributed greatly to his budget, to his campaign. So on a spur of a moment, on a Saturday night, I said, we need to do a press release with pastors in Idaho telling the governor that if he vetoes this, we are going to hold him accountable. So imagine this, Saturday night, I sent out an email. Sunday, all the pastors are preaching. By Monday, I had pastors calling me from around the state of Idaho saying, is it too late to sign your press release? We ended up with 18 pastors. One drove 2 hours down so that he could walk with us to hand this press release to the governor, who then did not veto it and did what we wanted 2 days later. So I asked Dave Sawkins, I said, Dave, if I did that in Silicon Valley, and I want you to understand the dynamics here. There are 1.8 million people in all of Idaho, surrounded by thousands and thousands of miles. There are 1.8 million people just in Santa Clara Valley. So I asked Pastor Dave Sawkins, I said, Dave, if I wanted to get 18 pastors to sign a press release to our county supervisor, forget about the governor, to our county supervisor about something, how many pastors do you think would sign my press release? And he laughed and he said, 4, and I would be one of them. Now, that is the difference that we're seeing between what's happening in Idaho, where the pastors are now taking back their authority. And so we just started something, if you'll give me another minute here to explain, we started something called PLACE, which is the Pastors Legislative Advisory Council. And what it is it says, look, pastors have throughout history been the authority, the moral authority in the community. So I just sent out, I invited 5 pastors to my home and I said, pastors, are you the moral authority in your church? They said, yes. Are you the moral authority in your county? They said, yes. Are you supposed to be the moral authority in your state? And they said, yes. I said, then why are we abdicating that moral authority to the politicians? Who gave them the moral authority? We have the moral authority through scriptures from God. And as long as it's not our moral authority, it's God's moral authority that we're talking about. I said, so who gave the politicians that moral authority? And they said, none of them. I said, then we need to take back that moral authority. And we found it placed.
Nice.
Amen.
In 2 weeks, we had 14 pastors sign up on place.
Nice.
Right now we're at 14. I don't know. We got to get to 50 or 60 pastors in Idaho, but we're already there. And now, instead of letting the politicians tell us what to do, we're going in and saying, hey, Mr. Politician, if you ever want to be elected, you better listen to us. And by the way, we'll make sure you never run again. Not because we're going to vote against you. But more than that, we're going to send our people door to door campaigning against you, talking about the evil that you have legislated.
Sweet.
We already have 4 politicians who called us up within 3 days saying we want to be approved by the pastors. So that's what we're doing. We're putting out voters' guides. We're sending out people. We'll see. It needs to grow, but man, it's pastors are jumping.
That sounds like a movement, Neil. That sounds like a needed movement. What do you think, Fred?
Yeah, it's fantastic. I've got a friend named Jim Doman with Church United.
Yep.
Yeah.
Jim's part of that too, actually.
Right. And yeah, you know him. He started this organization about 7 or 8 years ago, 10 years ago, Church United. They have 2,500, I think.
Yep.
2,500 churches just in California.
Just in California.
Yeah. And these
still the brave men and women, right?
Very brave. These pastors are gung-ho, and some of them are running for office. But they are taught the importance of getting involved in politics because of all these reasons. Yeah. So there's one right in I don't want to say the pastor's name or the city, but it's in Fresno County, and he's running for mayor. So,
Good guy.
Oh, yeah.
You know, Lawrence, you're doing something to make a difference. Tell us a little bit about your decision to run for the school board.
Okay, well, first of all, I want to say that I agree. I'm so heartened by some of the remarks I've been hearing because I felt for a long time there's way too much poultry in the pulpit. We don't have courageous pastors out there willing to stand up. Pastors used to be the moral leaders. They were very influential throughout the American Revolution and at so many other critical times in our history. So I just wanted to affirm that. Okay, so July 14th.
By the way, I love that. Poultry in the pulpit. I got to use it. I'm going to borrow it and give you credit.
Sure, you bet. Spread the word. Too much poultry in the pulpit. So July 14th, a day that shall live in infamy, a friend of mine who's been very active with a lot of school educational activities in this area around here in San Bernardino County, gave me a call, and he said, you know, we're really unhappy with a lot of the things going on in the local school board, which is the Redlands Unified School District. And he said, I think we've got a chance to flip it, but we're looking for a few candidates that we feel we can trust that have the right moral and political orientation. And he says, I happen to notice that you live in one of those districts. Would you prayerfully consider doing that? Well, this came out of the blue. I've never run for office before. I've helped lots of people, but I've never done it myself. And this was completely out of the blue. So I did. I started to prayerfully consider that. And after a couple of days, I was to the point where I thought, I'm going to need a reason not to run. I mean, it just felt right. There was a good feeling about it. So I have committed to do that. Boy, it has certainly changed my life. Maybe this is why I didn't run before, all of the different activities and things you've got to do. Boy, there's no time to yourself. But we're working there, and I just can't tell you how impressed I've been with the people who have come to support this effort, to kind of rally around this candidacy and just to make a difference in our school district. And I was aware of some of the disreputable things that were going on here locally, but boy, since getting into this and now making a point of studying it, it is just horrible what's going on with our kids. There's so much that's going on to take away their education, take away their childhood, exposing them to things they shouldn't be exposed to for another 10, 15 years in some cases. And it also then takes away their future.
Well, you know, that whole situation is the same in county after county after county. It's an issue that is really challenging us. And what a blessing that you decided to run. We're down to about a minute left in the program, and I'd love to keep going. This has been such a great conversation. I think we're hearing some things that really help us to have more hope and determination that we're going to do what you're doing, Lawrence, and get involved. And Neil, I've just admired what you're doing so much. You know, the price you're paying, Neil, getting on an airplane and going back to help this organization once a month and all of the expense associated with it. We want you on the program as much as you can. Richard, you helped me form this format, which we're really not into the format yet, but you've been such an encouragement. And then there's Fred Vanderhoff, who for 4 years has been my inspiration and leader politically in Fresno County. You've done so much here. We're doing a precinct program, but thanks for tuning in. Hope to see you tomorrow. God bless.
And I'm proud to be an American.
Thank you for listening to Wild About Liberty with Terry Wild, only on KXEX 1550.